Hello. I am nearing the completion of restoring the primary linear guideway pair of the 3B722 surface grinding machine. This is a large machine, weighing around 8 tons, with a 3-meter-long linear movement guideway. This includes 3 meters of a V-shaped guideway, which I have already completed restoring. It now has a geometrically correct shape with a total deviation of no more than 0.005 millimeters. I am now finishing work on the paired flat line guideway, which is also 3 meters long. 2 meters of this line are already completed, and now I'm scraping the final 3rd meter. The repair is being carried out meticulously, with high precision achieved through the use of an autocollimator and a precision level to control geometry. The history of this repair has already been covered on my channel in videos number 24, number 25, number 26, number 27, number 28, and number 29. However, today's video isn't about that. Of course, the primary task is to create a correct and accurate guideway geometry. However, while performing this task, I have noticed some strange phenomena, and I'd like to understand their causes. Take a look. When rough scraping is performed to restore the linear guideway straightness and remove a significant layer of cast iron, intense cutting with maximum possible force leaves numerous visible scratches along the cutter's movement vector on the guideway surface, specifically along the cutting paths. For example, you can observe these scratches here in abundance. In the final stage of scraping, when very fine layers are removed, these kinds of scratches are likely so faint that they are almost non-existent. The cutter itself cannot leave such scratches since its cutting edge is perfectly straight. I'd like to try to understand what causes their appearance. I don't think these scratches will affect the machine's functionality. I also doubt they will accumulate debris, leading to future issues, so they can probably be ignored, but I still want to understand their cause. The first assumption is that, during the backward movement of the cutter pressed against the cast iron surface, it could potentially drag along any loose chips and thus create these grooves. This is doubtful, but it's easy to verify. So, I change my technique to cut only in the forward direction, and I'll check whether similar scratches appear after this one-directional cutting motion. The cutter is currently as sharp as possible. The mark left by the cutter appears scratch-free, which is encouraging. Still, I'll test further by applying a bit of black pigment to the mark and then highlighting the surface relief using fine sandpaper. Now we see much more. We see that scratches are indeed present, along with some cross-grain marks, a result of cutter chatter under load. This chatter seems inevitable during intense cutting, although I might find a sharpening method or attack angle that reduces it. But that's not the focus right now, especially since this regular sharpening approach comfortably scrapes cast iron. So, it's now clear that the scratches are still there. The only logical explanation is that the cast iron itself contains harder inclusions that get dislodged by the cutter and accidentally become embedded in the cutting edge, leaving scratches corresponding to the size of these inclusions. We can also see the point where the cutter started moving, marked here. At the start, the cutter was pressed into the material more deeply, pulling out more hard inclusions, which we now see. Here is where this cut started. A close-up shows the cross marks of cutter chatter under increased load. In my opinion, they don't pose any problem and will most likely be smoothed out during the final, fine scraping. Inspired by this hypothesis, I asked ChatGPT if cast iron could contain harder inclusions, and it confirmed this theory. Here is the screenshot of my question to ChatGPT, and here's its answer. Glad to have your help. I have a question. Can cast iron contain small, harder inclusions that, when in contact with the scraper during scraping, leave scratches on the surface of the cast iron in places where scraping occurs? While scraping during repair of the machine guide, I noticed the appearance of many small scratches, and I want to understand the reason for their occurrence. Yes, cast iron can indeed contain harder inclusions that cause scratches during scraping. These inclusions are often microscopic particles or hard phases embedded within the cast iron matrix, and they tend to be harder than the surrounding material. Here are some common types of these inclusions. Cementite, or iron carbide, is a very hard compound that can naturally occur in cast iron. It is significantly harder than the surrounding matrix and can easily cause small scratches when the scraper blade passes over it. Oxides and slag. During the casting process, small amounts of oxides or slag particles can remain in the iron. These are often harder than the cast iron itself and, if they become exposed on the surface, they can leave scratch marks when scraped. Phosphides and sulfides. Cast iron may contain trace amounts of phosphorus and sulfur, which can form hard inclusions like phosphides and sulfides. These also contribute to potential scratching. To help reduce scratching, clean the surface regularly. This minimizes the accumulation of debris that could increase surface wear. Use magnification for inspection. Examining the surface under a magnifier helps identify areas with a high concentration of inclusions. Frequent blade sharpening ensures a smoother scraping process and reduces the likelihood of dragging harder particles across the surface. These inclusions are typically harmless in the cast iron's original function, but they can become problematic when performing fine scraping work for precision surfaces. I also want to note that when the cutting edge dulls, this scratching process seems to intensify, as a dull blade likely grabs hard inclusions more effectively. I believe this provides a reasonable explanation for these scratches. With fine finishing scraping, most of these scratches will be removed, and the few remaining ones on the finished surface of the guideway should not create noticeable issues in the machine's operation. So, I consider this observation interesting, but not problematic. Everything is proceeding normally, and I continue the work. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts or any additional insights on this in the comments. Thank you for watching, subscribing, commenting, and liking. Special thanks to those who support me on Patreon. Running my channel requires significant expenses, so your support is invaluable. The link to my Patreon is in the video description. The machine repair continues, and completion is near, so stay tuned for new video releases. Goodbye.